And welcome everyone to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board game. Well, just a second, Mark. I need to go over this checklist. Let me just 1 second here.
All right.
No googly eyes. Let me see. Yep, you have teeth and no sports stripes. Okay, yep, you're not a sock puppet. All right, we can continue.
I can turn on the zoom filter so I can vomit rainbows. Would that help?
I am joined live by my good friend Mark. How are you today, Mark?
I'm very well, Walker. How are you?
Fantastic. Like I said, this is a podcast about board games. We are going to talk about the game we reviewed exactly 1 year ago, the games we played this week, and then on to the news and why it doesn't matter, and then the topic of the week, which is questions from listeners, part 2. Mark, what did you get to play this week?
Well, why don't we talk about the as-yet unnamed retrospective intro segment, the AYURIS, which was which was Last Bastion, the somewhat difficult co-op by Antoine Bauza, French designer that we both love, kind of sort of an iteration on Ghost Stories. What's your recollection of Last Bastion, Walker?
My recollection is that it was a very fun game. My recollection is that I've meant to suggest it many times to people, but could never remember the name. It's like, oh, it's that game that's like Ghost Stories, but in a fantasy setting. It's
as opposed to Ghost Stories, which is more of a true crime setting. Yeah, it's a good thing you haven't suggested it, because this is one of those AYURISes where I'm like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have gotten rid of that game. I have had the urge to play it again, but I traded it away so quickly after we reviewed it, and I don't really remember why. Because Last Bastion's fun, and it very much like we enjoy the difficulty level. It starts out relatively tough and can only scale upwards. And seeing the news for the upcoming Reiner Knizia co-op game, which does not appear similar mechanically, but appears somewhat similar visually, vaguely, has given me fond bits of nostalgia for Last Bastion.
And the new one coming out has dwarves in it. That's your favorite, right? Isn't it? That's what I think I remember.
Oh, yeah, okay. I guess that's all the more reason to prefer Last Bastion.
Yeah, it's true.
Here I am just living with my mistakes, Walker.
And that is our recollection of Last Bastion, a cooperative sort of tower defense the castle as the monsters attack and destroy your people type game. It has had a feeling of Besieged as well, if people have played Besieged. Not quite so, fiddly and plastic heavy, but the same sort of fantasy feel and moving around to the different buildings and type thing. So the games we played this week, Mark, I have quite a few because it's been a while.
It has. So what'd you play?
So I'm going to start with Spire's End. This is the card game sort of storytelling, choose your own adventure. This is published and designed by Greg Favro. And I talked a little bit about it last week. So if you didn't tune in last week, I was getting a little, not upset, but a little, fed up with the double layered randomness. Like it would give you this whole list of options, and then there was a way to get the item that you needed, but you had to choose the right option. And then even if you chose the right option, there would be a D8 roll after that. And it's like, oh, you rolled too low. You don't actually get it. And just that double layer killed it. And then I played it with Huey, and we sort of each played a character, and we worked our way all the way to the end. He was getting frustrated a couple of times, but, by the end, we didn't mind it too much, the stuff that they did with the cards, with the final boss. And I meant to get the name of that type of game from him, but I've forgotten. It's that type of, slay the spire, sort of work your way through the game over and over and try to get the best ending type thing, because we could sort of, broke through the third wall.
Roguelike or roguelite.
That is exactly it. If you enjoy those type of games, this is a great solo sort of experience for you. Not exactly for me. There is a new one from the same... There's another one from the same designer. It's up on Kickstarter right now. It's sort of like number 2. I think it's called Hildegar's Adventure or something like that. It looks like they have this whole fishing system, and it's the same fantastic art. I've already backed it because I didn't mind it like a few times. Like definitely got my money's worth. Even though this was sent to us by a listener, I still felt as though, that I would have got my money's worth had I, bought it. I've played it several times and I enjoyed the story part of it, the art of it, the whole feel of the experience, but it's just not overall my type of game that I would return to over and over again. That's for sure.
So mechanically, it's not giving you the kind of staying power you'd like, but you thoroughly enjoyed the art and the setting.
Exactly.
Sounds about right. And of course, it's great that you've tired of it just after I left because you never did show it to me.
I know.
You promised.
Maybe I'll ship it. Maybe I'll ship it to you.
You made a vow, Walker. In terms of games that I've been playing this week, that I've been playing a lot of generally, that I'm not going to go into too much detail on, Regicide continues to win lots of friends, charming everyone with both its mechanisms and with its artwork. Played a bunch more of Race for the Galaxy, my all-time favorite tableau builder. And actually one that I just like to stress, which is called this a micro AYURIS. Normally after we review a game, and we've played the game a number of times in quick succession, I'm usually not particularly keen to return back to it immediately, and if I am, that I think is an excellent sign. And so thus I'd like to stress that I have gone back a couple of times in the past week to Imperium, both classics and legends, that we reviewed before I left, both solo and competitively, because in part I just love trying out the new civilizations. There's 16 civilizations with which to choose. And they play very differently. They have different approaches to victory. They give you a different sense of scope and sweep of history. And I have yet to tire of the system. This is a relatively long deck builder, about 90-ish minutes with 2 players if they know what they're doing. And I didn't think that pure deck builders would necessarily have the ability to keep me coming back for more and more and more when they were like that. Again, as contrasted with something like Mage Knight, which is A, similar to all games in existence, and also your mom, and B, not a pure deck builder, because deck building is just one thing among many. But Imperium, I think, really has legs. I'm looking forward to go back yet more, again, both to try new civilizations and to replay civilizations that I've had a lot of fun with. And I really do think it's a triumph. And so in terms of the ability to want me to come back immediately after a review, that's a rare feature and one that Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends definitely has. So another great shout out to Nigel Buckle and Dávid Turczi. I think they've done a marvelous job with it.
I got to play 2 bag builders, Mark. I got to play Orleans and Quacks of Quedlinburg. Orleans, I love to get back to the table finally. I got to use the tokens from Board Game Geek Store. So there's like multiple things that these things cross over with right now that I want to talk about. The fact that they're both bag builders. I don't know if you remember you talking to me but the counters that I got in my original Orleans were used so badly that that's why I had to get the Board Game Geek ones. Well, the expansion that we got from the publisher CMYK, they sent us a copy of Quacks of Quedlinburg and the Alchemist expansion. Just in the Alchemist expansion, they added the beginning tokens. They just said, we just added those in case your beginning tokens from your base game were a little bit worn.
Good call.
Here's a whole new set of replacement ones.
Good call.
Right? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Anyway, so got to play, introduced Chip the Third to Orleans and Huey. We had a great time. I did a whole new different strategy because we played with the order cards where you can deliver goods to the cities as you move around. That was a whole different, twist to the game, even though Chip the Third in his first ever playing of the game schooled us in score. That did not matter. Sort of on reflection, it's like, right off the start after the rules, he says, well, obviously you go to the castle and get more draw from your bag. That's the obvious first move. And I think we just went, ho, 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 well, you don't know what you're talking about.
Good job, Chip.
So we totally went a different direction. And then we look over and it's like he's, filling up his board every turn with, 6 actions. And we're going, okay, we do this one thing. So maybe he was right. Maybe we should have, focused a little bit more on increasing our bag draw at the beginning. But Orleans was a great play. Quacks of Quedlinburg was an instant hit here in the house with Butterfly. We've played it like 4 times already. She loves it. She asks to play it. We've only played the base game so far, but with 2, they've made it so you can play it 4 different ways, the base game. Like, because you have your starting components, but there's 4 different sets that they can be. They're sort of generic. And I know I've talked about Quacks of Quedlinburg before, how it's more of an experience, and I still stand by that. It's very low choice threshold because you're taking the token from the bag and putting where it belongs. There's no choice there. When you're purchasing new components, you're mostly spending all that you can to get the best chip possible. So, because everything's different prices, there's not much really to choose from. It's like, well, the biggest one I can get would be that, so I'll probably get that. They don't even give you the option of taking the same chip twice, because when you can buy up to 2, but they have to be different colors. Right. So that's even more limiting. But still, that being said, that just the experience of that push your luck, playing through it, and the fact that it's much like the other games we played where it's like different combos. And what was it? Cubitos that we played, the racing game where they, set up the different races and it's sort of different combos you have to work out. I like how they did that with the ingredients. There's different ways you can work the combos with them. I did read through The Alchemist that they sent us. I'll have more to talk about that next time. But it seems as though it's something that kickstarts the game. It's just a way to get more stuff faster, right? Huh. So we'll see how that plays out.
Look, I've said my piece about Quacks before. I certainly understand why people enjoy it. There's an undeniable sense of drama, engagement, and enjoyment from the mere simple act of watching someone push their luck by pulling something out of a bag. It's one of the things that's appealing about Raw, quite frankly. Just Raw also happens to be a good game on top of it. So I can definitely understand the appreciation of the experience.
And then we started a campaign of Sleeping Gods. This is by Ryan Laukat and put out by Red Raven Games. It's gotten a lot of buzz, so I decided this is the game we want to try next. We sort of did this big poll of, all of these campaign systems that we have collecting dust on the shelf, and it was higher on everyone's list. And you're going on this adventure to find, you're going across the seas, and you suddenly appear in this unknown land, and you have to wake the gods. I don't think there's any spoilers here. It's in the title, and to do so, you have to find these totems. So far, having fun. It's got this restrictive system, Mark, where you need these command tokens to do anything. And if you do anything, then you get fatigue tokens. And then you have to do a ship action. And all the ship actions are to get more command tokens. So the story and the art and the setting, all fantastic. This back and forth with, use your command tokens, get command tokens. I don't know if there's a different way that they could bleed them to you and just make it a little bit more interesting. I don't know, but we'll see how more plays out. And there's yet to be, I sort of talked about it with Huey. He said, there is an overarching story. It's, get the totems to get home. But so far in the storyline, there's no sort of, it's just like, here's a quest, go and do, quest complete. There's no sort of chaining quest yet. You know what I mean? So I'm waiting for a little bit more of a story to develop. Would be good.
What I'm waiting for is one of these overland adventure questy story type games, whether it's Tainted Grail, whether it's this, whether it's Seventh Continent, whether it's any of these things. That many of them have great settings, many of them have great writing, but they all tend to rest on a gamification of a system that is related to fetch quests, or just like manage your fatigue, manage your endurance, activate this menhir, power this thing. And so you get this repetition and grinding. And this is honestly one of the reasons why Legacy of Dragonholt was such a revelation. Because Legacy of Dragonholt just says, here's a series of interesting things that are going to happen. And there's no forced fallow. It's like, okay, well, now you got to go to sleep and you better do all these things to get your resources back. No. If you're going to tell a story, tell the story. And yes, of course, there are going to be game elements there, but don't send me off to go find the 3 food and 7 magic tokens that I need to go to push into the widget so I can get to the next interesting encounter. It's a little frustrating to me, honestly, given the high praise that Sleeping Gods had, and that's one of the reasons why I acquired it for you. I was hoping it was going to break from this mold, but disappointing.
What it does have is it does have this very interesting combat system where it says, okay, pull out these monsters, it'll give you some numbers, and you sort of line them up. They all have this, grid along the bottom, and sometimes they all have different numbers that you need in order to hit them. So you can pick the one with the lowest, and then as long as you put the majority damage on that one, you can sort of spill over into the ones that were harder to hit.
Okay.
So it's got this interesting, as long as you connect them and you can, make them do less damage and take away their special abilities. And so there's a little bit of a puzzle element there. And It's kind of
Sure.
neat. And
But again,
the other
to compare it to Tainted Grail again, Tainted Grail had an interesting combat system too. And my point is that as a gamer, I have a finite amount of endurance for compelling story married to some version of grinding somewhere. And if you tell me that Sleeping Gods may have this marvelous universe and this marvelous art, but it's tied to grinding, I'm like, I've been there, I've done that. Maybe someday I'll be ready to go and push through and do an entire campaign of that. And in fact, just to be frank, I'm kicking myself for not having brought Legacy of Dragonholt with me. I'd intended to, but I forgot entirely. So it's sitting in Kingston, unfortunately. But quite frankly, they're all of a piece in my head. And I don't know if other gamers experience things that way, but I am sick to death of having my fun being parceled out by meaningless grinding and fetch quests.
True. And Huey had this issue right off the beginning, but I sort of tried to dial it back again with the notion that maybe we didn't realize how important these command tokens were, and maybe we frivolously spent them in the first couple of turns, and therefore we were, struggling to get a pool back. So it's sort of righted itself a little bit, but just the fact that you have this back and forth.
I see.
And I did want to finish up with the combat. It does have this one other system where everyone has this sort of combo token, and they're all sorts of different things, like either more damage or easier to hit, or this person lets you go diagonally. So if I damage the monster and cover a part that just has like a combo gem on it, then I get to give my combo token to somebody else. And then when it's their turn to attack, they can use that combo. And if they cover, you can do this cool chaining thing where you can pass the combo tokens around. I thought that was very neat.
Neat.
And that was Sleeping Gods. And I just want to wrap up very quickly because I think Mark is done. I just want to go over.
No, not even close.
Oh, sorry.
What are you doing?
I'm very sorry. Well, because you sort of did a whole bunch of row. I thought
just the ones that I've already reviewed. I've got all these new games to talk about. Stop.
All right, my bad.
Stop being so selfish. Jeez, man.
It sounded like you were done.
Oh, man. I tried Pan Am by Prospero Hall. Pan Am is a game about the golden age of air travel, and it's got I have to confess, it's probably the most mechanically interesting Prospero Hall game I've ever played, because Prospero Hall games tend to be enjoyable and often highly, highly derivative and relatively simple affairs. The thing about Pan Am, which is interesting, still very accessible, very simple, it's a worker placement game that kind of sort of has some of the auction elements of, say, your Vegas Showdowns of your Amun-Re, whereby I put a worker here saying I'm bidding 4, somebody else, if they put their worker bidding 6, I get my worker back, and I could then try to upbid them on the same thing. But the strange thing here is that there's this interplay between the routes that you found as a fledgling airline and the fact that Pan Am is ruthlessly expansionist and is just gobbling up routes all that it can. This is semi-random at the end of each round, but the idea is that you want Pan Am at certain times and in certain routes to eat your routes, because that's a huge cash infusion. This is not unlike the game Acquire, and this is why some people have compared this to the Sid Saxon classic Acquire, because in Acquire you make investments largely because you want to lose them through mergers, because then you get a massive cash infusion to the face. And in Pan Am, the reason why you want all this cash is because you're actually buying Pan Am stock. For what it's worth, my understanding of the period of the golden age of air travel, this is roughly how things worked. You had these local regional airlines that had little routes that were basically hoping to get swallowed by Pan Am because that was the biggest game in town, and this kind of tapered off by the late 60s when Pan Am became relatively irrelevant on the international stage. But anyway, the way this is manifested in the game is, as I said, you use this worker placement element along with this auction to set up these routes, and they increase your income, but who cares about income? Because you want Pan Am to come and give you the massive check. I enjoyed it. The biggest problem I had with it, though, was twofold. Number one, there's this deck of events which are very fun and cool and determine things like the stock price of Pan Am stock, and which routes or how many routes Pan Am is going to give, or maybe give you a little Benny, allowing everyone to upgrade a plane in their fleet, for example, and all that's fine. But some of the endgame events can have a huge deal on final scoring because, for example, the last round event that we had was, for every route you still have on the board, get a share of stock in Pan Am, which, as I say, is the only victory condition. And given that so much of the game is about this dance between the income on the one hand of maintaining your own routes and the desire of being bought out on the other, this is kind of like a consolation prize for people who had made routes poorly or who had made bad bets. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. And looking at some of the other events, they might seem to have slightly too consequential an impact on final victory. The other problem that I have is that for a light, accessible, fun game, it's too long. It's about 90 minutes, which is not irredeemable. It's just when you're talking about light economic Euros, there are a number of good ones that are around 45 to 60 minutes long. You know, whether it's something like Whale Riders, which is fundamentally an economic push your luck Euro kind of sort of anyway, or any number of other Knizia games, or perhaps even something like Hanzo Teutonica, which is about routes and knowing when to cash in routes and other things like that, which will also be quicker than that. So it's not too overlong, but I felt it kind of wore out its welcome for what was basically a very simple set of operations. You get cards to get routes, you get planes, you set up routes. That's more or less what you're doing over and over and over again. So I felt it wearing its weight a little bit more. But it was well enjoyed by a number of people who liked the theme of the Golden Age of air travel and some of the mild thematic touches here and there. So in other words, it's a Prospero Hall design. It's a solid crew. I'm still not a huge fan of the way they don't credit individual designers. Them and Games Workshop, I think, really need to get their act together. And I enjoyed the attempt, and I definitely see the similarities to Acquire, as I said. But I feel that in terms of a solid competitive experience, the events kind of undercut that a little bit too much that I'd like, and I would like it if it shaved about 20 minutes off the playing time. But as I say, I enjoyed it. So that was Pan Am by Prospero Hall.
Lastly, for me, I just have 3 games that we streamed. So we like to stream as many games as we can. We did Imperium the Contention. We introduced Dewey to this game. He loved it right off the hop. This is where it's a card system where you lay out a card galaxy and you have these tons of factions. You move around this galaxy. You have ranged attacks. You have ranged colonization. It's very interesting. At least I have yet to play it 4-player. We were so close. Hopefully very soon.
I'm sorry.
This is published by Contention Games.
My tubes failed us.
I'm sure we'll try to get it to the table again. This is designed by Gary Dorotsky. We also streamed Wingspan. Dewey and I both have the app, so I like to do unboxings. This is how I do the unboxings now, is on Twitch. So we had Coffee Trader that I wanted to open up. But anyway, Wingspan, we played it twice last week, actually. We played it once in real life with all of the expansions and once, which is the base game, online. I really feel that all the expansions they've added just sort of negates a lot of the actions, because one of the actions is trying to get food from the feeder and trying to work that into your actions. But with the expansion, you have this nectar and you have all these abilities that get you more food, and you just don't really need, a lot of times you don't even need to take that action anymore. You just have this flow of ingredients coming in and you just never have to do it. It just seemed to speed up the game, but make a lot of the things unnecessary, but still enjoyed by everyone. We're going to try it again. Dewey demands a rematch. I also demand a rematch because the AI beat all of us. Very embarrassing. Designed by Elizabeth Hardgrave and put out by Stonemaier Games. And lastly, I've started this big Destinies campaign. This is put out by Lucky Duck Games. It's like a heavily app-driven sort of pick-your-own-adventure type game where you're scanning QR codes and it'll ask you if, do you want to do this action? Do you have an item that you think will help you with this action? And you can scan any item you want and it'll just tell you, why would you even choose that? Are you dumb? And then you say sorry to the app and you put the card back down.
I'm getting flashbacks to old Sierra point-and-click adventure games.
And then it tells you how dumb you were and how much health you lose and how many skill points you go down.
Oh, wow.
All right. So, but the really cool part, the part I enjoy about Destinies, is your skills. You have 3 different skills. I think it's like knowledge, strength, and dexterity. I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but roughly that. But what it is it's a track from 1 through 12, and you have, depending on what character you play, you might have anywhere from 3 to 4 discs starting out in different positions on this track. And you're rolling a pool of dice, and depending on where you fall on the track is how many tokens you've exceeded, is how many successes you get. And there's all sorts of different sort of events in the game that allow you to start moving these tokens down the track, which will make, your more successes and more stuff. And you have these exhaustion dice that you can sort of build up and roll for all these different tests. And I just really like how they did that system.
So it's an adventure game where you're just moving stat markers along tracks?
Well, it's like any other adventure game where you increase your stats, right? But this is just a different way to do it, right?
I'm getting flashbacks to Vindication now.
Well, I am going to stream. It's like a 3-part big campaign, so I am going to, stream the rest of it. It was this, crazy setup where you have to have where I had 3 cameras, and then I found out I had to sort of do something funky with one of the cameras because I realized afterwards that I had to scan the cards as well. So I had to break the thing and cross-reference the vortex combupulator, and it was, it was all a grand production. And that was the last game I played. Destinies by Lucky Duck Games. I did the intro and the first mission. I am enjoying it. It's an interesting little solo game. You can play it competitively, but I'm not sure if I would enjoy it that way. You get this it is kind of interesting in a way. You get a character card, and it'll tell you what you need to do to win. And usually it's 2 different ways. It's usually, sort of like an evil way and a fun way. Or no, sorry, an evil way or a good way, right? And then you can ask people about your quest. And it has 2 different codes, right? So you can ask them about, that one or the other one. And you can sort of find your way that way. So we were playing a nun, Mark. And I made the mistake of letting the listeners guide me through the quest.
Bad
so
call.
We had at the end she would be Nunzilla, the kleptomaniac brute who cleansed all the unworthy with fire.
Okay.
So she burned everything. Well, sorry, she stole from them and then burned it, and then yes, it was quite funny at the end.
In the listener's defense, if someone is going to burn to death, whether they have their belongings with them is probably not going to provide any comfort.
She came right out of the 40K universe. Cleanse them with fire. Fire cleanses all.
Okay. So having moved out west, Off the Page Games is a new game publisher that is actually located about a 10-minute drive from where I'm staying in Vancouver. It is a collaboration between Jay Cormier and Sen-Foong. This is the same design duo that designed the absolutely relentlessly delightful junk art. And Sen-Foong also has designed a number of other... Well, so has Jay Cormier, but Sen-Foong also designed Kingdom Rush, which you very much enjoyed, and I thought was there. So their first project is Mind Management, the Psychic Espionage Game, and game is in quotes. So this is an adaptation of a comic of the same name, namely Mind Management, and I have to say that a lot of the game is about trying to evoke the atmosphere of the original property. I say this without having read the original property, but there's a lot of artwork from the comic. There's new artwork from the author of the comic. And it's all about a secret organization and agents going rogue from the secret organization, which is classic fodder for some hidden movement type stuff, which is appropriate because Mind Management is a hidden movement game. A lot of the trappings of the game are indeed trying to tie it into the original setting. As someone who's unfamiliar with the original comic, I have to say that a lot of those efforts, to me, fell flat. And I didn't get really a sense of paranoia, or of intrigue, or of double-crossing, or of doubting reality, or of any of the various prompts, or any of the sort of thematic overtones that the manual and the box art and the cards are desperately, desperately seeming to trying to want me to feel. So there's that. Then there's the issue of it as a hidden movement game. Hidden movement games are typically not my favorite, but I have to say that Mind Management is probably one of the better ones I've tried since Nuns on the Run. Nuns on the Run actually being my legitimate favorite hidden movement game. I played Spectre Ops not too long ago, and it mostly left me cold, so the fact that I got any enjoyment out of Mind Management, I guess, is a testament to something. I played as the rogue agents, and one of the common downfalls of many of your hidden movement games, and this is certainly true of Spectre Ops, is it tends to be very inflexible with player count. And Mind Management is no exception. The box says 1 to 5 players, and you can play it co-op if you choose to, but most of the time it's a 1v-all game where you always have 1 player who is the recruiter, aka the bad guy, and 4 players who are the rogue agents who are trying to chase down the recruiter. Now, if you have 4 players, they each control 1 agent. If you have 3 players, well then, guess what? 1 player gets to control 2, and the other 2 control... Anyway, there's always going to be 4 rogue agents, which is awkward as all hell. But I played it with 2 players, and so it was just one player controlling all of the rogue agents, and that's probably the ideal player count, because if I wouldn't want to play it with 5, suffice to say. There's not a whole lot for an individual agent to do, and they only get to activate every other turn anyway, so it's super awkward in that sense. There are a number of standard riffs on the formula. You can do actions to try to get some information to piece together where the recruiter's been, where the recruiter's going, and so forth. The recruiter also gets agents in the form of these things called immortals, and again, the game wants me to be very afraid of these immortals, but since any rogue agent can go and smack them around for information, they don't really seem that frightening to me. They, in point of fact, seem like just fire hoses of information that are ready to be pounded on. At any rate, Mind Management, I think, is a solid entry into the genre if you enjoy hidden movement games and or if you enjoy the original comic. I think it is worth taking a serious look at. But if you're looking at something to give you an immersive story-based experience or induce that kind of paranoia, I don't think that it's necessarily successful on that front. And so that's my early experience with Mind Management. I'll probably give it another try as the other side. I played as the rogue agents, aka the good guys, effectively like a deduction game. I'd like to try it as the recruiter, who's the one doing the hidden movement, and see how I feel about the game from that perspective. And then finally for me, saving the best for last, Walker. The absolute best for last, Kabuto Sumo.
Jealous.
The Kabuto Sumo review copy came in from BoardGameTables.com. This is designed by Tony Miller. And Kabuto Sumo, I mean, what else do I need to say? It's Kabuto Sumo. It's the game with sumo wrestling beetles, and this is the best anthropomorphic animal sumo wrestling game since Sumo Ham Slam in 2011. And unlike Sumo Ham Slam, there's not a trenchant examination of overeating on the part of hamster sumo wrestlers, but here what we have are various kinds of insects, usually based on adorable puns linking to some historical and or wrestling figure. They're engaged in a sumo wrestling affair. What you have is a series of discs on a circular raised board, and what you do is you push discs from the outside, hoping to cause discs to fall off. There are, in point of fact, 2 ways to win. One of them is by pushing off your opponent, and another way to win is actually by... It's called submission. If the other player has no more discs to play, they basically run out of gas. So there's this interplay, but between the two different kinds of victory conditions. Sometimes you want to go for broke and try to shove them off. Sometimes you might accept that you're not going to shove them off and just go and try to gather more discs. On top of that, there are lovely, lovely custom pieces for each bug based on what their power is. The electric bug has stars. The bug that's basically Teddy Roosevelt with the serial number filed off has a large stick. It's absolutely great. There's a bug based on the Nature Boy Ric Flair, which is fabulous. It's a delightful, delightful game. I have had tremendous, tremendous fun with it at 2 players. You're
just rubbing it in now.
Yeah. You can also play it in 3 players, which strikes me as a grotesque mistake because it leans real hard into the multiplayer conflict problem, because the victory condition is knock anyone else off. Why would I, on my turn, threaten to knock off one of my opponents when I know that my other opponent can then just finish the job and win? So I haven't played it, but I don't think I'd ever try. With 4 players, unfortunately, it's a little fragile. So you play in 2 teams of 2, which is definitely better than every bug for themselves. But the setup is such that people can be shoved off much easier. And so in a number of games I played 4 players, it was over before everyone had a turn. It was literally 3 turns. Both Team A gets both their turns in first. They knock somebody off. That's it. So it's much less room for maneuver.
I'm just wondering why couldn't you just play with the 2-player setup and just take turns, pushing discs?
Slike that's an option.
That seemed it might work better. Yeah,
it's an option.
So there's 2 questions. I was wondering, is the setup nice and quick and you're ready to go? Because I haven't looked at the rules or anything yet. I sort of wanted to wait till I actually got it.
The setup is nice and quick. The game is super quick, so proportional to the game, the setup is a little bit in depth, but really it's just a function of just slapping down a whole bunch of discs. It's not too tedious. It looks more daunting than it is.
And then the motion of starting your disc to the finish push and this wiggling back and forth, does that seem to be a problem? You're just supposed to push it straight ahead?
I was actually going to talk about that because I have some Walker-based concerns. Specifically, Walker has this concern when playing some dexterity games and any template movement games, your Gaslands, your X-Wing. Walker gets in his head and he's so concerned about cheating or about not following the template exactly. You might have to let go of that to enjoy Kabuto Sumo, because when you're...
I just want to make sure we're clear. It's about me
I know.
playing it wrong. I'm not worried about other people.
I know.
Okay. I just wanted, it did sound as though I was... Okay, go ahead.
No, yeah, absolutely. When playing Kabuto Sumo, there are two areas of possible concern. One of them is you're not supposed to change direction of the disc as you're sliding it in, which can be difficult because as it gets resistance from different areas of the board, you're going to feel the disc get less resistance in some directions. So you actually have to control the disc moving straight in a straight line. The second problem is you're supposed to move the disc all the way onto the board, but no further. And so you have to know exactly when to stop pushing the disc on. So if you are seriously concerned about those things and are unable to get over yourself, i.e. Walker, you might have barriers to entry. If you're playing with children, which I think all dexterity games should be played with children, just accept the fact that children are grubby little cheaters and are probably not going to follow the rules. If you are playing with adult cheaters, I suggest you need new friends. That's what I would have to say about that. Aside from those shortcomings, though, Kabuto Sumo has been relentlessly endearing. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. It is a marvelous little shoving game. It actually has surprising trade-offs in the mid-game, surprising switches to determine whether or not it's time to trigger your special ability, which is expensive but awesome. Pivoting from trying to shove off your opponent to then moving to an exhaustion victory. Lovely come-from-behind moments. Kabuto Sumo is an absolute treat.
Can't wait.
And those are the games we played last week. Now on to the news and why it doesn't matter.
So first of all, there was some stuff going on this week, so we're just going to go over our policy like we always do. We have and never will take any payment of any time from any publishers, designers, distributors, or any other sort of title or name that you want to give to anyone that sells games. For our content, we only accept payment from our listeners in the form of Patreon. And that's that.
Absolutely. Yeah, this came up recently in the discussion of a Jamie Stegmaier blog post, in which he also went out of his way to name-check us, saying that we dislike games because we enjoy being contrarians and or we do it for the clicks. So thanks for that, Jamie. And I have other words for Jamie Stegmaier that are not appropriate to be repeated on air.
So that being said, we have some actual real news to go on to. There's a game coming up called King Domino Origins, Mark, because apparently King Domino is going to hit all the different notes. And this is sort of a cave dweller, pre-human. And I think it fit, pre-civilization is what I meant to say.
There you go.
I think this fits the theme of the game a little bit better, actually, because you're sort of expanding out, exploring and making your little plot of land bigger. And it looks very interesting. It has all sorts of different tokens and stuff to put on the board as you move out. I'm looking forward to taking a look at it. King Domino Origins. I also have Pandemic Jumps the Lich King. Pandemic is coming out with a World of Warcraft edition, Mark, because Pandemic.
No. You don't get to blame Pandemic for this. This is a World of Warcraft sin, not a Pandemic sin.
And then a game that came out in 2018, but they're redoing a lot of it's called Vecto Race, Mark. This has some trappings of sort of an X-Wing / Gaslands template movement system, except that it has an interesting, sort of hexagon at the front. So you can sort of, instead of just moving straight out from your front, you can go off at angles. And I'm interested to take a look because it's all made with these cardboard cars that are very easy to, customize and convert up, so I'm interested to take a look at that as well.
I was intrigued too, yeah.
And another one that's interesting to me is Fort. We talked about Fort. We played Fort. It had fantastic art and a very cool theme, but did not come together whatsoever. It said that it was a deck builder that you didn't actually get to build, but it's coming out with a cats and dogs expansion, Mark, because you need cats and dogs for children, except this is it's a 26 card expansion, and there's only 18 cards that actually go into the deck. Just the dogs go into the deck. The cats look as though there's some sort of event card.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I just have some numbers here just to throw out, just because it seemed. So the expansion Canadian is $13.20. A Magic the Gathering is a 15 card booster pack. It's $4.15. Shards of Infinity, because I've talked about Shards of Infinity a lot lately. They have a new expansion that's coming out soon. It has 60 cards in it. It retails at $9.95. So Fort, Cats and Dogs expansion.
News from Germany. The Spiel des Jahres jury has come back with its decisions, and the SDJ, the eponymous Game of the Year, has been awarded to swag favorite Micro Macro Crime City. Let me say hats off to that. That is an absolutely solid pick. Their Kennerspiel des Jahres award, which is supposed to be for the quote-unquote connoisseur, or those that are knowledgeable about games. The translation varies from person to person and what it's supposed to represent, has gone to Paleo, which is absolutely a game in a box.
It has, there's cards in that box, Mark.
There's components,
cards,
tokens too.
The cards have pictures on them.
Absolutely, there's art in Paleo. That is absolutely something we can say.
Absolutely true. We love King's Dilemma. There's going to be a game called Queen's Dilemma.
So excited.
So excite. So it's sort of like a follow-up. I don't know if it's like a continuation of the story or not. I haven't read too much into it because I don't want to, spoil anything. But if it's just more of King's Dilemma in a new game, I am so looking forward to it.
My understanding is that they're going to be using the fundamental dilemma system married to a slightly more conventional territory control map-based experience. So it might end up feeling like some kind of hybrid. I don't know. I'm just very, very interested to see where they take the system.
So Mark, they've announced the name and shown some artwork for the new Carolus Magnus reprint.
Chucky Big Big 2? Chucky Bigger Bigger?
Chucky Big Big 2. And I don't know how to pronounce the new name, but based on the artwork and the theme, I'm going to call it Entrails.
Spell it for me.
ERIANTYS.
I don't know how to say that either. Ariantis, I guess. It's the magical world of floating islands. I guess that makes slightly more sense than the original theme.
Floating Deadhead does not approve.
Well, but the floating Deathhead needs to go and survey his floating islands, doesn't he?
No, he does not.
Okay.
Can't wait to make the videos of laser death eyes blowing up all the art from this game. No, I'm being serious. I don't agree. I don't like the new art. I don't like the theme. Just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, Leo Colovini's games are always aggressively themeless and abstract, and so I guess they've decided that Charlemagne doesn't sell, which is, I suppose, okay, but for me, it will always be Chucky Big Bigs.
Exactly.
Except when we call him any one of our 7 other silly names for him.
That's true. That being said, the art is perfectly fine. It's perfectly lovely, but it's all very cutesy, fairy, like, dwarves and unicorns and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, but in fairness, Walker, you also tend to be openly mocking of historical European themes as well, so...
This is true. There's just no pleasing me, Mark.
It's true. Okay? I've noticed.
I'm contrary for the sake of being contrary. I want those clicks, Mark. Give me the clicks.
Jamie and I are very concerned about you, Walker. We don't think you actually enjoy games.
Next up, speaking of crazy cute and games that look amazing, there's a book, Mark, it's called Wonder Book. And we've seen some pop-up stuff with Train. We've seen that on Kickstarter. Now, this is a pop-up book where you place your miniatures all over the stuff there. It's very chibi-like, very cute, sort of adventure pop-up game. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how it plays out. This is called Wonder Book. And lastly for me, Mark, have you ever wondered in Underworlds how just one of your heroes would fare on its own?
I don't play heroes in Underworlds. I play Skaven or I play Goulds.
So how would you think just one of those characters would do? This is the question well. Games Workshop wants to know, because apparently they're reprinting, I didn't even know this was out in the first place, Arena Mortis, where you can take just one of your characters from Underworlds and pit it against other single characters and somehow have fun. And in case you don't think that's for you, well, too bad, because they put cards that can be used in Underworlds in the box, so if you want those cards, you gotta buy it.
Oh boy, do not approve.
And that is Arena Mortis by Games Workshop.
I have a couple of notes about Peterson Games. Peterson Games being the game publisher run by Sandy Peterson, which publishes games under the Peterson Games logo. First of all, there have been yet more delays for the Cthulhu Wars stuff that people have pledged for more than a year ago. And they basically have said, this is a complicated arrangement, and this is just more of an object lesson about how future Kickstarters need not to handle this. It's just the perfect level of transparency where nothing is their fault, but not enough transparency to actually explain anything. Basically, their story is something, something, something. If we publish the game now, we're going to go bankrupt, and you wouldn't want that, really? So what we're going to do is we're going to wait and get more funding from other places, and then print it along with more of the base game to sell to retail. And anytime anyone asks the question, so did you raise enough money to print the games in the first place or not? The answer is always yes and no at the same time. Because, of course, they're a private company, they're not going to open their books, which is perfectly within their right, but at the same time, they want to make everyone understand that they're perfectly solvent except for the ways in which they're not, and all of our money is safe except for the ways that it's not, and nothing is possibly their fault. Now, moving on to this, and this is slightly more pointed, if that's possible, The Atlantic published an article about colonialism in board games, and on the one hand, I'm very, very, I like it whenever there's thoughtful coverage of board games and talking about these kinds of serious issues. I don't agree with everything in the article. Some of the framing devices I thought were misconstrued, but I think it's a very worthy read, and I'm glad that even mainstream publications are addressing some of these weighty issues in the board gaming hobby. I'll include a link in the episode description. But one of the things that I couldn't help but notice on the topic of Peterson Games was that Sandy Peterson himself replied to a link to this article saying, "Why can't I just enjoy my games without any of these fun-destroying nannies trying to tell me how to live my life?" To which I was tempted to reply, but I don't like Twitter drama. Why can't I just talk about games with any of these ignorant retrogrades telling me that I can't think about my games? But anyway, setting all that aside, I'd like to identify this classic move that a lot of people have done. I'm going to call it the Peterson two-step. And Sandy Peterson's not the only person who does this, but it is a common thing that happens. Step one is, well, I am an artist. I'm an artist. I've been in this industry for many years. I'm going to attach my name to everything that I put out, and I, as a creator, am important and am contributing to the field, which is absolutely true. But the second step of the Peterson two-step is, just let me play with my toys, and let's not talk or think about any of these issues raised by my toys. Like, well, guess what, Sandy? You can't have it both ways. Either you're making a cultural artifact that we can discuss, or you're not. If you're not, shut up and take your names off the box. If you are, let's talk about things like colonialism. Anyway, that is my coining of the term the Peterson two-step. Please feel free to use it in any field appropriate. And that is the news and why it doesn't matter. Moving on, we are now proceeding to the second and final installment of the second and ongoing installment of listener questions. So I'm calling this listener questions, bravo, bravo. We will probably do this again at some point in the future, but this is the current crop of questions. So Walker, why don't you start us off?
I will. This listener would like some recommendations for some newbie families to the hobby and 5-year-old children.
What do you got, Walker?
I have Rhino Hero and Super Rhino Hero Battle.
100%.
Ghost Blitz. And then a game that I haven't played, but everyone says is fantastic, is Animal on Animal.
Oh, yeah. Animal on Animal is nice. I would also add Dancing Eggs. Dancing Eggs is fun for both adults and children. And also something I'm surprised, Walker, this isn't necessarily for 5-year-olds. 5-year-olds might be pushing it, maybe not. Depends on the 5-year-old. We've had a lot of luck with Skull and Cockroach Poker. Skull especially, because even relatively young children can immediately internalize. Because I don't mean to break it to you, but kids love to lie. Now, Cockroach Poker, they're probably not going to internalize what happens when I'm right about catching a liar. Even adults sometimes get confused about that. But the fundamental card play is definitely within their grasp, and so I would add those. Dexterity games, you can never go wrong.
Yeah, I also have Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter, Kabuto Sumo, and Coffee Traders.
Yeah, any Splotter game as well, I think. A lot of the Avalon Hill games from the 80s, 100%. Walker, what are some of your hobbies and interests outside board gaming?
Well, at the moment, Mark, there are none. Because between actually gaming and preparing for talking about gaming, there's not much time left between work and family life.
I hear you.
But there used to be hobbies. There used to be paintball. There used to be hockey. And there used to be like RC car tournaments. But
oh, wow.
there are none of that anymore.
I used to be heavily involved in debating, but that was a university affair, and there's not really much outlet for that past university. But I'm still very much into... I mean, yeah, they're hobbies, but they're hobbies shared by everybody. I'm a big fan of music, television, and movies. So those are effectively my non-gaming hobbies now.
Mark, the next one is, it says, now that you've been recognized as the greatest podcast ever, has fame changed you? How do you deal with paparazzi and groupies and autograph hunters?
I would like to reject the premise of the question.
I said Coke and barrel rolls in our private jet.
Good call. Walker, what are your top 5 favorite Sentinels of the Multiverse characters?
I have Unity, Omnicron, 10, Tempest,
yep.
Raw, and Knife.
Mine are the Southside Sentinels, the Idealist, Tempest, Captain Cosmic, and Chrono Ranger. I'm actually surprised there's only one overlap, so I guess Tempest is the official swag Sentinels character.
I agree.
So this next question I actually quite like. It's about a game being miscalibrated. So basically the background is, we've talked about expectations a number of times on the show, but what if a game presents to you a number of strategic arms that that are facially equally viable, but one of them turns out to be not particularly viable. So, for example, one which we commonly talk about is that Jade is a lie in Gugong without the expansion. Another example that I would give is slightly different, not necessarily in terms of strategic, but in terms of undercutting expectations of Scythe. We've had a number of people, actually the Handwerker in particular, talks about how he has distaste for Scythe because it looks like you're going to get to fight with these giant fighty mechs, but you almost never fight with them. So, would you criticize, Walker, a game for being miscalibrated?
No, what I have here is that I just feel frustrated because I feel that I'm missing something in the mechanics, because I feel as though I'm sure it's been play tested and run through multiple times, and if they have this in the game, then there must be a reason for it, and either I'm playing it wrong, or I misread a rule, or I'm not, hitting the combos the way I'm supposed to be. I'm missing something, so I just feel frustrated.
For me, it depends. Sometimes I like having my expectations undercut, and sometimes I don't. And in the case of Scythe in particular, I rarely criticize a game for setting expectations by virtue of artwork. Like, I've played a lot of games that look like fighty games that are in point of fact basically economic management and efficiency games, and vice versa. Economic management games that turned out to be vicious, brutal affairs. But if there is an arm of point acquisition that's just routinely and regularly and reliably not worth it, like Jade, that kind of bothers me a bit. Another example that was mentioned by the same poster was Barrage. Apparently, amongst high-level Barrage players, you don't really go for power generation. You instead try to max out one of the building tracks to get one of those 7-point income things, and just rely on that for your victory points. I have less of a problem with things like that for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't play games competitively very much. And so I'm happy to have my rear handed to me by somebody who's playing the game a slightly different way. And number 2, at least in that specific case, in the context of Barrage, you're still building power infrastructure, so you're not completely ignoring the theme. If in Barrage you could, sell sheep on the side, and that was overpowered, that would bother me, because, But if it's about building more dams and building more power stations, and that's how you get points rather than actually generating power, fine.
Plus, if you're not generating power, then you're not stealing water from other people, and therefore you're not having fun by ruining the game for everybody else.
So, Walker, what is your current relationship with the creative process of making the podcast?
What I've written down here is I'm enjoying pushing the quality and the complexity of the streams and the videos that we're making, and the creative process is just the topics, right? Coming up with different and interesting things to talk about without having to fall back on top 10 lists of whatever every single other week.
Yeah, more on that in a moment. And I have to say, Walker, you've definitely been, Walker has always found ways to push the envelope, which is great, because between the two of us, in terms of our collaboration, I am, unsurprisingly, the conservative one. If it worked last week and the week before that, why on earth would you ever change things? But that's my attitude towards life generally. And so it's very, very good that I have a partner like Walker, who is willing and able to try new things and be very successful and throw components at the screen in the process.
The next question is, do you ever get anxiety or writer's block or fatigue or doubt, and how do you deal with it? And my answer is that I just fall back. It's the same thing with the topic. The only time I get anxiety or worry is when we haven't come up with something until, near the end of the deadline, and I'm worrying about not doing my part to come up with ideas.
Well, and my response to that is very much a corollary to the previous discussion. That's one of the great things about working in a partnership. Very, very, very seldom is it the case that we both feel completely tapped out. Usually when one of us doesn't have a good idea of what to talk about, the other one steps up to the plate. And so there's never, like, a couple of times it's happened where we're both like, I'm not feeling this. Like, what are we going to do? Usually one of us is able to supply either the creativity or the energy or the enthusiasm to push us through. And that's one of the great things about having a partner to do this with. I wouldn't be able to do it alone. And in point of fact, I tried doing it alone and I failed. And that's one of the reasons why Swag survives, whereas previous endeavors have failed.
Next question is, have either of you been tempted to design a game?
That sounds like work.
It does. I know years and years ago that I got together with he who shall not be named and doesn't actually exist.
The Wendigo, the North Wind?
Exactly. And we actually set a day aside that we were going to do this, that we were going to sit down and start. And it lasted for 2 whole weeks. And then never again did we meet.
I briefly, when I got started in the hobby, thought that I could design a game, and the process of trying to design the game disabused me of that notion. Because my natural intuition was to just pile mechanisms that I'd stolen from other games on top of each other, and the result was a pointless, stupid mess. And so I have not gone back to that attempt since.
Actually, I'm going to do a little bit of a callback, since this question sort of reminded me of it, because there was the angle of, we're negative for the sake of being negative.
Yes.
I'm making a prediction, Mark. The next thing that's going to be is like, well, if these guys weren't such cowards and had, had the honor or the, could
courage.
design a game of themselves, then, they wouldn't say these things. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That will be the next one. Guaranteed. It's going to be next.
Those who can do, those who can't criticize.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
just wait for it.
As somebody who's in academia, I've certainly never heard things of that ilk before. Next question. Sometimes podcasters get their name or likeness put into a game. If that were an option to become promo cards for a game, what existing game would you want blessed or scarred with your likeness for all time? Well, here's the thing. I'll speak for myself, and Walker can jump in if he disagrees. I would be very loath. I'm not, never say never, but I'd be very, very reluctant to ever enter into that kind of relationship with a designer or a publisher. Like, our bread and butter, to a certain extent, our editorial policy is to remain independent. And if we collaborate officially with some kind of designer or publisher, if we become part of a product, I worry what that would do to our independence and our credibility. And it's potentially permanent. Like, I don't aspire to ever run a Kickstarter, and B, much less have collaborate with this publisher and that publisher and have a whole bunch of cards that we sell and then we sell on Board Game Geek, not to pick on the Dice Tower, but whatever. That's what they want to do. That's cool. That's for them. That's just not anything I ever want to do, because I don't want to have to think of the artists and the designers and the publishers that I've worked with personally when I'm reviewing their future stuff.
It's true, and it's come up a couple times. My only point is the fact that I don't understand why people would want to ruin their games by putting anything about us in it. And also, it's like the whole, every time you open the box, you need to get ready to suppress that gag reflex. I don't know why people would want to do that.
Walker, given your love for making top 10 lists, when can we expect to see a top 50 games of all time from each of us?
Never.
I don't like top 10 lists. I don't like top lists of any time. We only did it once, and that was because people wanted to hear our top 10 games to get a calibration of our tastes. And we did it. It's there. I don't think our lists have changed substantially, if at all, since we originally published them. And I think that if you want to listen to get a sense of our tastes past that, well, we've got a couple hundred episodes for you to listen to of us talking about games. That's fine. Just top end lists. There's not really room for much depth there. It's like my top 8 game of all time is this game. I really love it. It's excellent. It's amazing. Moving on to number 7. Like that.
Yeah, no. Wonder if we do like a pub meeple. No, never mind. What are your thoughts on the future of Kickstarter? Do you think this craze is going to end at some point? Sooner? Later? Never?
What do you think, Walker?
I think it'll never end. It's going to constantly change with what the market demands. We just talked about this a few weeks ago, where people are saying Kickstarter isn't what it's supposed to be or what it started out to be, and it's like change is inevitable. This is gearing towards what people want. They want to make money. This is what people want. This is how they're going to change.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree. I think that what is useful for hobbyists, both new people to the hobby and more experienced hobbyists, is just to have a clearer understanding of what you want to get out of Kickstarter and a better sense of editorial discretion about what kind of projects are going to deliver that to you. So, in other words, don't complain that Cool Mini or Not Kickstarters are just a bunch of sometimes thinly play-tested plastic exclusives. That's kind of their brand. That's what they do. It's their thing. I mean, yeah, there's lots to criticize there, but by the same token, you send them $100, you're going to get a lot of content. And sometimes it turns out to be amazing content. But that's a matter of taste, of course. So yeah, more consumer awareness I'm in favor of. Thinking that Kickstarter is some sort of blight or an abomination necessarily, or that it's going to die, I think is somewhat misguided and probably false. Walker, listeners want to see us return to rankings by pie. Can we start including pie ratings for the games we review?
I can only agree. I keep thinking that we need to go back to this, and I keep trying to remember. So I'm going to try to remember next week. I'm going to try to put a pie at the end and start ranking games by pie.
So for those unfamiliar, there was a period where Walker...
Very brief period.
A brief period, yes. Where Walker would compare games and say, this game is like a fine cherry pie, or whatever. And we actually did, shortly thereafter, we did a topic about ranking systems, where we talked about the benefits and the benefits and drawbacks of various ranking systems. And we once again talked about the pie rating system. My problem is I don't really like pie, and I'm not familiar with the wide varieties of pie, so I'm not really able to participate fully. But I fully endorse Walker's returning to this form 100%.
Next question is, Mark, have we ever considered reviewing more Splatter titles? Well,
we've talked about most of them, really. Bus we haven't discussed because I played Bus back when it was first published and not in its re-edition. Con or Cans, I don't know how to say that word. Scripts and Screens has been out of print, and I haven't played that. But I mean, other ones, we talk about them when we play them. So we've talked about Zimbabwe, we've talked about Food Chain Magnate, we talked about Antiquity. I don't know.
I was going to say, like, when you return, I'm sure if we want to dive deeper into one of them, we will do that.
All right, Walker, what are your top 2 favorite video games?
Here I have League of Legends and Slay the Spire are the 2 top ones that I'm playing at the moment. League of Legends has just been from day one, practically from the day that it was conceived. I've been playing League of Legends. I play it almost every day. I just really enjoy it. It's all about the ARAM all the time.
My top 2 favorite video games are Star Control 2 and Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup.
Like I said, I was going to put my 2 video games of all time I put in here as well.
Okay.
I have Jagged Alliance and World of Warcraft.
Okay. Jagged Alliance 1, not Jagged Alliance 2?
I just grouped it all together.
Okay.
I didn't want to... and I might say XCOM, but that would be 3 and that would be cheating, so I definitely didn't say XCOM.
Okay, definitely not XCOM. Definitely not 2 Jagged Alliance games, and definitely not XCOM, so definitely not 4, definitely just a top 2. Walker, how do you organize your game collection?
Well, we talked about before, I have a Calyx, and I put all my games in there quite randomly, except for one box. One box I keep not clear, but is solely for the purpose of games that I'm working on at the moment, i.e., my Shelf of Shame, which is only 2 games now. It was 1. It was only Red Outpost, but now it is Coffee Traders and Red Outpost. Oh my God, Coffee Traders. I'm going to go on and on about it, by the way, Mark. Every episode for the next 2 years, so just so you know.
Okay.
That's how long it'll take for me to get it to the table.
And I don't organize my game collection either. I have a whole bunch of metal utility shelves, and I just organize things such that they fit.
All right. Next question is whether or not you take into account the availability of a game when we talk about it or review it. Like, do we care about whether or not the listeners can get it or how hard it is for them to purchase? Mark, what is your answer to this?
Well, I'd just like to stress the follow-up, because the listener said it seems that game reviewers are getting games way before the general public in a lot of cases. And that doesn't really apply to us. Sometimes it does. Very, 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 very rarely. But in those cases, we flag it. You know, this is an early preview copy, or we definitely tell everyone where we get it. If we don't say where we get it, if we didn't get it from the designer, the publisher, or the distributor, we bought it. We bought it standard retail. The problem is a lot of these games are being published in a somewhat periodical model. The questioner specifically referenced Micro Macro Crime City. I bought that from a physical game store. Walker, you bought it from an online game store, if I'm not mistaken. And we just bought it like common plebs. We don't have special access the overwhelming majority of the time. And it's usually just a sort of a differentiation between the kind of hobbyist, and I'm not stratifying here. I'm not saying that one's better or more elite or more of a gamer than the other. I'm just saying there are some gamers who every time their favorite game store or stores get new stock, they're immediately checking the update to see what's available. And then there are some who are not. And the ones who are not, because they have, social lives and better things to do with their time, by the time they hear about a game, it's frequently out of stock everywhere, because that's just how the market's working, kind of. And so, yes, there is an increasing rift between those who are aggressive in pursuing new games and those who aren't. And I just think it's not that we have some special status, we just aggressively pursue new games.
This has actually come up with something else as well, Mark. The one of the Master of the Universe games, it's coming out in Europe only.
Yes.
And I'm trying to decide, there's many people I can get it shipped to in Europe.
Mm.
And I'm trying to decide, well, if most of our listeners can't get it, then what is the point of going through the effort of bringing it in and playing it if they can't get it?
Well, but here's the thing, and I talked about this actually in an episode of So Very Wrong About All the Games You Like Are Bad recently, and this was about cost. Should we talk about the cost of a game? And a corollary to that discussion is, should we talk about out-of-print games at all? And I think the answer is obviously yes, because there's value in criticism, there's value in analysis, there's value in discussing these things as cultural artifacts, and many listeners are curious about hearing about games that they would never in a million years want to play, whether or not the game's any good. So is it worth it for us to track down a game if we're interested in talking about it? I would say absolutely, regardless of whether or not the listeners are necessarily able to get a copy. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe everyone is listening to this saying, no, Mark, we only appreciate So Very Wrong About Games as a buyer's guide. But I have a sense that's not the case, especially based on the number of people who give us feedback saying, I don't share your tastes at all, I don't play the kind of games you play, I never will, but I still enjoy listening to the show anyway. So I'm suggesting, Walker, is if you have the power, you should go ahead and do that. Did you get that all reference?
Will do.
If you have the
yeah, I got it.
Did you
Thanks.
pick up on that? Okay. Next up are a couple of French tongue twisters for me. One of them is actually really kind of easy. Si mon tonton, ton sera tendu par ton tonton. That's the version that I've heard before, which is the more, it just has par ton tonton again. It's basically if my uncle shaves your uncle will have been shaved by my uncle. Tongue twisters don't tend to make much sense. The next one is, I'm going to stumble over this one. Je suis ce que je suis, et si je suis ce que je suis, qu'est-ce que je suis? And as you can perceive, if any of you speak French, my suis there, we're kind of getting into suis, which is probably part and parcel of my Montreal background, but there you go. So there's some French-Canadian tongue twisters, some French rather, not French-Canadian, they're from, they're orthogonal, they're hexagonal French tongue twisters for you.
I even had an answer for this, Mark. Do you want to see if I can get through this?
Go for it, Walker.
My answer was, pourquoi je tuerai mon oncle avec un Turczi à garçon?
I'm going to need a translation.
Il mit dans école $5. How'd I do?
I think the Trudeau plan of bilingualism as envisioned in the 60s has a bit of a ways to go.
It was supposed to read, I do not wish to run over my uncle with a lawnmower, for he still owes me $50.
That's a great story, Walker. So, our least favorite listener is back. I used to think he was my countryman, Sam Hulo, but he's back to torture us.
Did we look into this? We said that you were going to look in to see if there's a way to block a single particular person from downloading.
I'm still trying to find his IP address. But the good news is, this one's only going to be painful for you, not for me. So therefore, it's going to be delightful for me. Hansa Teutonica, Gaia Project, and Space Hulk. Play one once more, destroy one, and keep one in your collection forever. Go.
Oh, I thought you were going to do it first, just because it would be easier for you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, Mark, but Space Hulk is a fantastic game.
Yes.
But it is very dated.
Sure.
And I have to reflect on how many times it's been to the table in the last 10 years. So I'm afraid Space Hulk is going to have to go.
Oh, sacrilege. Okay.
Hansa Teutonica is going to fall sort of into that same category.
Oh, no.
Some people feel it's a little too confrontational.
What?
A little backstabby. A little too aggressive.
A little too fun and interactive?
So one more. Look, this hurts me, Mark. This is not easy for me.
Okay, you're right. Sorry. You're right. This is a difficult call.
Hansa Teutonica will be played once more, and then will float away on my tears of sadness. And we will keep Gaia Project because of its many different paths to victory, and I'm sure an upcoming expansion all will be fantastic. And that is my lineup for those.
I would happily consign Gaia Project to oblivion. If I never play it again, that's fine. I don't hate it, but I wouldn't miss it at all. I would play Space Hulk once more, and I would only play Space Hulk once more because everyone knows that the best way to play Space Hulk is Suicide Mission. So,
I was about to say that. And that one game would be Suicide Mission.
Of course, it would be Suicide Mission. I like the other missions, but I mean, come on. Suicide Mission is so iconic that therefore one more play of Space Hulk is easily done, and Hansa Teutonica stays in my collection forever just because it is so delightful and such a quality confrontational Euro game. How dare you, Walker?
I'm so sorry.
No, you're not.
Next question is, whatever happened to Swag? Swag? Answer, your mom.
We briefly discussed it. We ran a couple polls. There just didn't seem to be much interest in it. So
yeah, we did like a whole GQ article. Like we spent a lot of money putting that out.
That
as a questionnaire.
Hiring Anna Wintour was a mistake in hindsight, I think.
It's true, but that was an in-stream email exchange. Put it that way.
Yeah. Cool. She has some opinions, that's for sure.
What is your current job, if any?
This is my job, you ungrateful listeners. This is all I do. You are all I think about. You are all I labor towards. And you dare ask me what my job is. In all seriousness, there are frequently weeks where I spend in excess of 40 hours on the podcast. Other than that, I'm retired.
I get to work. I work at Costco. I am what they call a merchandiser.
Ooh.
I have downgraded myself to this because I no longer wish to care about whether or not people show up for work or do scheduling or change hours or all of that management stuff or ownership stuff. So from what
literally and bluntly, you no longer wish to manage children.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you made the right call.
I get to show up for work. I get to work as hard as I want, which is very hard because that's how I do's.
Full send.
And then I get to go home and not bring my work with me.
Yep. All right, the next are a series of questions for me. Sock it to me, Walker.
For Mark, any opinion on Brian Lee O'Malley's Seconds?
It was fine.
All right, ethical issues you think people should be giving more or less weight than they currently do?
I think it is very strange. given most people's assumptions about animal welfare, that people don't critically interrogate the way their lifestyles are founded on a mountain of animals that have been literally tortured to death. And I just find it shocking how little attention people pay to that, given their views. Now, I have slightly idiosyncratic views on animal welfare, so I have a different approach to it. But there's that. And number two, I think that confidentiality is criminally undervalued in most professions. And number three, I think that people regard casual lying as far too acceptable. But then again, I'm a Kantian, so you should have known all that.
And what are the 2 games you are good at?
I've commented on this before. I think there are 2 games at which I'm actually kind of decent, and those are Raw and Infinity. I think I'm competitive in those 2 games. Other than that, I'm a dabbler.
Next question is, what is the most difficult game you've learned and has a most satisfying sessions thereafter?
Well, Walker, what do you think?
I have Food Chain Magnet listed here.
Good
and listed
call.
here alone.
Yeah, any of the Splatter games would definitely qualify, but for me, the number one is probably Magic Realm, the infamously complicated Richard Hamlin game of the 1970s and 80s. And it's one of those games where, yes, there's a lot of system mastery, and I almost never defend games that have heavy amounts of system mastery, but sometimes you see those subtle nuances and those little bits that just open up the game experience that make it feel like you've learned something valuable, even though you haven't really.
Actually, now that you said Magic Realm, I thought of Mage Knight as well.
Sure. Well, Mage Knight is very much like Magic Realm.
Exactly. There's hexes. That's why it reminded me of it, because it's exactly the same.
Yeah. So we don't mention...
Wait. Are there cards in Magic Realm?
No, kind of. Okay.
Okay, it's exactly the same then. All right.
We don't mention abstract games much on the podcast. Are there any favorites or even notable abstract games that we like worthy of mentioned in our opinions? Walker.
I know I've played a lot of... I know they have a name, but there's like a whole set of sort of like black and white counter...
The GIP project?
Yeah, I've played a lot of those with the Winigo. But ones that stand out for me that I feel are sort of abstract are just more of the chess-like games.
Yeah,
so
like the Duke.
Games like the Duke and Onitama. Both of those, I really enjoy those types of games.
One of my favorite is Fealty by R.R. Royce. It's the game he published with Asmati Games before he published Spirit Island. And of the GIP project, I did really enjoy Devon. I thought Devon was pretty good. But yes, abstracts are not typically my cup of tea.
Mark, what are your favorite games at 7 or more players?
The Resistance, Sidereal Confluence, and Guards of Atlantis.
Guards of Atlantis, okay.
Of course.
I have Wavelength, Just One, Code Names, Coyote, Telestrations, and Caverna.
That is a lie, and you know it.
Not really, exactly. It is a lie. But the fact that you can play Caverna at 7 is very funny. Sure,
and just in the same way that you can play Welcome to with 100 players, it's not a good idea. Yeah, no, I definitely echo your list, but I wanted to focus on, there are lots of party games that are good 7+. And I guess the Resistance it's not a party game, but social deduction games often fall into that. But Sidereal Confluence and Guards of Atlantis are 2 quality strategy games that play at that level and higher, and therefore deserve all the plaudits possible.
All right, with shipping on Kickstarter starting to back up, and some projects are printed and still waiting on containers, are we changing our Kickstarting purchases? I.e., are we waiting for it to come out in retail instead, or are we just using Kickstarter like we usually do?
For me, it's too soon to tell. I don't know how long this current tragedy is going to keep going. Like, is shipping going to normalize? Are we going to get to a new normal, or is this the new normal? But my attitude for a while has been, when it comes to Kickstarters, I will kickstart a project under one of 2 conditions. Number 1, I sincerely get the impression that the publisher could use my support. It's a small project, and I think I'm actually going to make a difference. Or number 2, I'm going to get a whole bunch of exclusives, and so it's a purely mercenary decision on my part. In either of those cases, I'm probably willing to wait.
True, yeah. No, I haven't. None of this has changed what any decisions I make. I feel as though Kickstarter, the waiting is part of the appeal to Kickstarter. The anticipation of waiting for the game, They're watching the updates, seeing how the game changes.
Really?
And
you love the fact that all the Canadian Ankh copies are still in China?
Well, okay, that with notwithstanding,
okay,
that is a different thing, different time. This doesn't say how they're saying back up for everybody. They're not saying this whole country gets their game 6 months before everybody else. That's a different issue.
Okay,
but I've just been doing Kickstarters for so long. We kid about talking about the same game. We're still waiting for this. We're still waiting for that.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not really like that. I just when someone knocks on the door.
Right.
And the game's there, then I have it. I don't...
This does not explain much of your behavior during Pledge of Indifference, but sure, whatever you say.
That's all for entertainment, Mark. It's negativity for the clicks, man.
Oh, boy. All right, so Walker, I don't know if you've done this. I did it because I kind of enjoy doing this kind of thing.
For sure. It says top 3 authors, movies, books, records, albums, and TV shows. So I have... movies at number 1, books at number 2, and TV shows at number 3.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. Walker, out.
Top 3 authors are Immanuel Kant, Jonathan Latham, and George Orwell. Top 3 movies are Old Boy, Lion in Winter, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Top 3 books are Grounding for the Metaphysics of Morals, The Critique of Pure Reason, 1984. Records are Lateralis by Tool, Whatever Happened to PJ Souls by Local H, and Lift Your Skinny Fist Like Intended to Heaven by Godspeed You Black Emperor. And top 3 TV shows are The Wire, 6 Feet Under, and Super Dimension Fortress Macross.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That is the end of the questions. I want to thank everyone. They had a great list of questions this time.
It was a good run. Except for Sam. Sam, never again.
Yeah, I'm not even going to talk about it. Like, seriously. Okay. It's painful to even think about it.
It's true.
And it's not the question. It's just painful to think about him. No, but this being said, this is pretty well a cut and paste from the questions. And none of these are repeats from the last time. So it's an odd thing. Either they went back and listened to it and made sure they didn't copy any questions, or it just happened to be completely new questions. I think it was pretty impressive.
So that's going to do it for us. Thank you very, very much for joining us for So Very Wrong About Games. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach Walker via his email, justrolledadice@gmail.com. You can reach me, Mark Bigney, on Twitter @TheGamesYouLike. For more public discussion, you can find the So Very Wrong About Games Facebook page, or you can check out our Board Game Geek Guild, which is guild number 3236, and you can find us on Patreon and Twitch. We read everything you send us, and we'll get back to you if we can. Thanks again for tuning in, and we hope to see you again soon.
Peace!
You've been listening to So Very Wrong About Games, produced by Michael Walker and edited by Mark Bigney. Special thanks goes to What Does It Eat for generously allowing us to use their most excellent song, FOS, as our theme. You can find them at whatdoesiteat.com. You can reach us by email at soverywrongaboutgames@gmail.com or on Twitter @SoWrongGames. Thanks very much, see you next time, and always, try to be right, but remember you are so very wrong.
Thank you, dear listeners, for once again joining us, and with our glorious return comes the return of Swag Presents Masterpiece Theater in honor of Prospero Hall and the Reverend Dr. Vincent, Earl of Diesel, Esquire, OBE. Today we're talking about Fast and Furious 6. Walker, your thoughts?
My thoughts are that ex-girlfriends that don't want to get in touch with you are far more important. And family is far more important than the thousands and thousands of dead family members left on the highway and crushed by a tank. We are so welcomed at the end of the movie how families are brought together and how it's such a happy ending. And I wish they had just panned away to the devastated, destroyed families left on that highway.
I have a slightly different suggestion. I think that future movies should just abandon the setup. Because the first 20 to 30 minutes of this movie I found painful, where we get to see Rock the Dwayne Johnson try to explain why things are happening or why anyone's doing what they're doing. No. Just start the movie in the middle of a car chase and just do the thing. Just go and do the thing.
Do the thing. If, like I said, I can see the progression here. First it was cool cars, and then it's got up to the point where it's just everything you need in a movie. We have cars, we have fighting, we have guns. Just cram it all in there. You got it. Giant tanks. And then we get awesome lines like, oh, we need a plan B because they got a tank. And he says, no, we need a plan A, B. No, we need so many letters. We need a whole new alphabet of plans. Can't get this kind of writing anywhere, Mark. This is quality Hollywood material right here.
Mustang update. A previously beautiful 1969 Mustang Fastback is used as an anchor to flip a speeding tank end over end 180 degrees. And I will note, this is not the climax of the movie.
It's funny you said that, because I thought for sure that stopping the tank would have been the end of the movie, and then I was reaching towards, the close button, and it's like, no, this is just the 2/3 point.
The Reverend Dr. Vincent, Earl of Diesel, Esquire, OBE, can do whatever he wants. Thank you very much for joining us for Swag Masterpiece Theater. We hope you join us again for the continuing adventures of the Fast and or the Furious. Please do take care.
Bye-bye.